James Kaufman, World News Report today. Even though most EBT recipients thought it was the Republicans' fault or Donald Trump's fault, they weren't getting their bloated amount of food stamps and welfare. Well, it was actually always the Democrats. Let's listen to one of the Democrats, John Fetterman, tell you all about it. They were using as leverage to get things they wanted. At your expense, by the way.
What do you make of the argument that this was your only leverage? And without this, you're at the mercy of the Republicans and they don't want to cut costs?
Yeah, and it's like I refuse to use American, citizens that, food insecure, not pay our military. They are not my leverage. Those are my fellow citizens. Those are the ones that I defend. Those are the ones that I fight for. Some of them are the most vulnerable ones. I refuse to put them in the middle and just, like I said, it's just like, again, it's a fundamental betrayal of, what I think is our core party's values.
Democratic leaders like AOC and Bernie Sanders were determined to starve Americans and keep the government shut and have no one get paid until they received more bloated socialism programs that they demand from the U.S. taxpayers. The U.S. taxpayers have had enough, and Fetterman actually responds to them as well. And ladies and gentlemen, I heard both of them yelling as this bill was passed. Crazy.
Do you believe that this may be, at least in part, about your party changing and the populist movement in reaction to MAGA and the Democratic Socialists, that this may be a moment where they want to take over the Democratic Party?
I promise you, America's future and my party's future is not socialism or kinds of outlandish far left kinds of ideas. And it's been a year ago, after we lost the election, a lot of those parts and part of those ideas pushed our party over the cliff. And that's why we're in this situation right now. That's why we're firmly in the minority. And that's why we've lost control of the White House. So some people, if you think that's a solution, that's fine, but it's going to be a competition of ideas, and we know that's not going to prevail. What's going to prevail is common sense. What's going to prevail, choosing this country over, part of the extreme in our party. What's going to prevail is common sense, and I do believe, for me, in the kinds of chaos that we have in this Trump administration, we should respond with order and logic and patriotism, and not shutting down our government right now. And that's where I'm at. And I don't know why that's controversial. That's not a big tent party. If you're not allowed to have the opinion that it's wrong to shut our government down and put these people in the middle of it and now referred to as you're a traitor, or, saying all these other kinds of.
And he's referring directly to Bernie Sanders and AOC and the radical social bunch that are basically taking over the Democratic Party, while all the, stupid young people follow along like sheeple, not knowing what stands in the future for them. Now, with all that said, he spoke out. They got the bill passed, even though 8 slimy GOP senators actually added themselves an extra $500,000 for having their phones tapped by Biden in taxpayers' dollars, instead of having to go after those people themselves like we would in a civil court situation. And that interview was last night. Wouldn't you know it, this morning he was jumped in by the gang. Statement from Senator Fetterman's spokesperson. During an early morning walk, Senator Fetterman sustained a fall near his home in Braddock. He's got a black eye, by the way. Out of an abundance of caution, he was transported to a hospital in Pittsburgh. Upon evaluation, it was established he had a ventricular fibrillation flare-up that led to Senator Fetterman feeling lightheaded, falling to the ground, and hitting his face with minor injuries, a black eye. We'll see if he changes his tune now. Senator Fetterman had this to say: "If you thought my face looked bad before, wait until you see it now." He is doing well and receiving routine observations at the hospital. He has opted to stay so doctors can fine-tune his medication regimen. Senator Fetterman is grateful for the EMTs, doctors, and nurses who are providing his care currently. I mean, I'd like to hear directly from him. This is scary. Facial damage, including a black eye. How convenient. Sounds like they jumped him into me. These people are slime balls. They're actually a criminal syndicate. What's going on here? He was the smartest person in the Democratic Party. You see where that gets you. Please share. Please subscribe, and always remember that anything's possible in Bizarro World.